Masters of the Air is out in full on Apple TV+. It's the third World War II TV show produced by, amongst other people, Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, making it a companion piece to Band of Brothers, which for my money is one of the best TV shows ever, and The Pacific, which I have somehow not seen thus far. This one was in development for over 10 years, initially at HBO, later ended up at Apple. According to Spielberg, it's the largest production he's ever been a part of, which is saying something. It featured thousands of people in crew and extras, wide ensemble cast of characters, and apparently it cost $250 million to produce, to make, which would make it one of the, if not the most expensive seasons of television ever. The show is 9 episodes long, around 1 hour each, stars Callum Turner, Anthony Boyle, and Austin Butler, and tells the real story of the 100th Bomber Group, which was part of the American Air Force, starting with the first cruise of the B-17 bomber planes arriving in England early in the war, early for the Americans, through many of their missions over Europe, ending with the end of the war. So inevitably, I will be comparing this show to Band of Brothers, and in that direct comparison, Masters is a very solid show, good companion piece, but doesn't quite reach the same heights. But there is an understandable reason for why it doesn't, and I'll get to that. I want to start with the good stuff. The production value is incredible. The cinematography, special effects, costumes, locations, sets, the attention to detail, incredible. I've read that for the flying scenes, they actually built 2 full-size replicas of the B-17 plane, put them on a gimbal, suspended them in the air, and surrounded the whole thing with the volume, which is the technology first used on The Mandalorian, where you have the LED screens surrounding the set all around it, instead of a green screen, which allows the filmmakers to project pretty much in the scene while they're shooting the actors. They can project the surroundings and the environments and the special effects, and it allows the actors to react to that, to the actual effects that will be in the finished product. Plus, in this case, it also allowed the plane on the gimbal to move according to the turbulence and the bombs and so on. The result is really impressive, and the flying scenes are very impactful and engaging and terrifying at times. I think the performances are good, especially Callum Turner felt like an anchor of the show, which is a pretty wide ensemble overall, as I mentioned. We meet many different characters across the episodes. Joanna Kulik also shows up for one episode and has a very memorable performance. Now, here's what doesn't work quite to the same extent that it did in Band of Brothers. The story feels less tight and coherent. We don't really follow the same one group of characters all the time, but rather jump between them, and some of them move in and out of the story, many of them because they die, some only start showing up towards the end. So it's kind of difficult to follow all of this and get an emotional connection with anyone except for the main trio. On top of that, I felt the movie doesn't really do a great job of explaining where on the timeline did the missions fit with what was going on the ground in Europe at the time. We never really get the full context, aside from that one mission which takes place during the invasion of Normandy. So it kind of feels like we're jumping from one mission to the next, but how does that fit with the wider picture, with the wider war theater? Is kind of obscure. Now, I know there's a good reason why these 2 flaws are there, and it absolutely has to do with historical accuracy. In real life, the bomber crews unfortunately did have an incredibly high mortality rate. People did die left and right, so it's in line with that we have this constant rotation of characters. And also, the bomber plane crews, they did play a bit of a supportive role to the armies on the ground, with occasionally their missions not even entirely making sense from a direct strategic standpoint, other than to distract or draw out enemy planes away from what really mattered. So I get these reasons, but yeah, nonetheless, it does make for a less seamless and more difficult viewing experience. For me, it took a couple of episodes to really get settled in this type of storytelling. And when I did, it reminded me a bit of Catch-22, although with much less humor. And I ended up enjoying it. So if you have the patience to stick it out and follow, focus on following the story, it's fairly rewarding. It has its flaws to be sure, but ends up a solid show in my book. And for enthusiasts of the Second World War or history in general, I think it's mandatory viewing.